show came about with not knowing at the time necessarily how much furniture we were going to be able to show of Mary's earlier career, and so we were thrilled to get to include a piece of the earlier work in this show. But since moving to Los Angeles, and you'll probably be talking about this, she's shifted gears to really focus on cloth and on fabric strictly, and in terms of the wall work that you're looking at. She did create the piece that's in the window for this show, which was a tremendous accomplishment, and we were thrilled to get to host this site-specific piece.
Hello, everybody. Well, I just want to say it's really phenomenal to get the opportunity to show a solo show in Los Angeles. It's a pretty unusual, great thing to have the opportunity to have. So my background is I was born in Northern Ireland, moved to London when I was 21 and studied at the Royal College of Art in furniture design, grad and undergrad. So for all of my life, until about 3 years ago, I thought I was a furniture designer. And I always worked at the periphery, but I still always thought that I was a furniture designer, until a couple of really outspoken and honest people in Los Angeles told me that I just had to stop. I'm an artist, and I had to stop. One of them is in the room. Thank you, Paula. There's 3 people I can think of, and it's nice that one of them is here. I am not alone. For the last 21 years, I've been in partnership with Peter Wheeler, who's a kind of background kind of person. He's actually literally hiding behind. And he will be really annoyed with me that I've brought his name into the conversation, but it would be totally dishonest of me if I didn't. Peter trained as a furniture designer as well. So once I'd realised that I wasn't a designer, what do you do with that? I realised that I was a sculptor. In my sculpture, I was really fascinated by comfort. I designed a lot of chairs where I was really fascinated by how people felt when they sat in the chairs and got a real kind of sensual pleasure from sitting in the chairs. No one thought I was concerned with function or with comfort because they could see the textile, they could see the sculptural form making, but the comfort element was always at the core of what I was doing. So the thing that's left when there's no function is how does somebody feel when they're in the presence of the work? And that's really the key thing for me, is people's reactions when they see it for the first time, and they maybe want to live with it. I want to create a powerful impression, and it's really exciting to create a powerful impression from something that's white. So now I want to show you some furniture that shows you my background and what's led up to what you see in the walls. I'm not going to talk about this unless you ask me questions, but I'm going to talk about the furniture. If I can start. I did a lot of commission work, and the commissions I really love the commission process. I love getting involved with the clients. I love hearing what they like about my work, because everybody likes something different, and I like trying to understand how they're going to use it. So this was a chair for a client who wanted some very rich, deep colours and texture. And he was a guy. Most of the people that have commissioned me have been women, and most of my clients are women, but this was a guy. And he was going to put this chair in the middle of his bedroom that had mirrors on 2 sides. It's going to sit in the middle. So I knew that it would be a really great opportunity to do something that was really spatial. So the metalwork is 3-dimensional. It's very sculptural, very spatial. The seat itself is symmetrical, but the 2 arms are asymmetric. So he wanted to sit in this reading the paper. So it's got a long seat, and it's got a nice rake to the seat. This is a piece I called Anneliese, after a Dutch friend. Again, I'm really interested here in the function. You know, if you sit on a chair, people are all shapes and sizes. Mm-hmm. So for somebody that's small, they can. There's a gas strut underneath, which is what you have for office chairs. So you can put the seat down low, or you can put it right up high. So it fits different people's heights, but also it spins around. And that means that you can have the table on the right-hand side or the left-hand side. So just thinking about how people would put it in their homes. Sometimes the table on the left works better in your home or in your particular room, or it could just be your right-handed or left-handed. So I like that kind of opportunity of doing something where people had a choice. I named it after Annalise because she was pregnant at the time, and I love the idea of having the main thing and then an extra thing. I don't know how to say that word. This was a client in Florida, in Palm Beach, and she wanted a chair to sit on while she was reading a newspaper. So this was commissioned in '97. She wanted to play cards, she wanted to be on the phone, and she wanted to do needlepoint. And she's a big collector of studio arts. So when I was with her, I thought, and she also wanted white. She wanted a white seat. So really white for a chair is not so practical if it's upholstered. So I proposed at the initial conversation that it was quilted, which she absolutely loved. And she said a phrase that just keeps on coming back to me. And she said, I'd love that. And it has got to have a shot of something terrific. And terrific is not a word that I use, but I loved what it invoked in my mind. So I had very rich purple, emerald green, and bright orange as threads for the quilt stitching. So she could sit on this, it became a chaise longue, she can sit on this with her legs astride, and she can lay her newspaper out in front. When she had this, her husband then also wanted to commission a piece, and that has happened to me again and again, where one person in a couple wants to commission something, the other loves the process and is fascinated by what I'm doing, and they feel it's completely unexpected, and then they want something as well. So her husband got something completely different, where he could fling his left leg over it, and he would sit reading the paper, but more like this, with it one leg flung over, and his is more of a circular shape. 1991, I'd spent a couple of years in Milan working for different design studios, and I came back to London and wanted to make a new body of work. I felt that nobody knew me after I graduated from college, and I needed to do something to tell people where I was at that point in time. And I taught myself upholstery. I'd never done upholstery before. I taught myself some techniques for carving and shaping and building up with foam. And I'd done a little bit of dressmaking as a kid, and I had a good sewing machine. So I developed this. And so what I did with my furniture is I always use furniture as a way to, I used function and how people sit and relate to a chair as a way to bring out a character in the chair. So, for example, with this seat, when you sit down, you've got ever such a slight gap in the middle of your legs. So why have a support underneath that area? So that was my rationale. So okay, let's carve that away. And the same with the back. I've done a couple of chairs with hard wooden backs and also upholstered, where there's a slit in the back because you don't actually need a support right where your spine is. You need it either side. So this is divided into two. And here I was working very much developing a character that was nothing to do with function, but making it very functional. And the back even has a lumbar support in it, so when people sit down on it, they're expecting something totally whimsical, unserious, and they sit on it and their body just tells them something else. And that's what I really loved about making furniture. This chair was bought by the V&A Museum, Victoria and Albert Museum. And it was very funny because the curator had seen it in a show. He came to my apartment, and he chose the one out of a collection of chairs that he wanted, and I put it in a cloth bag, and he picked it up, and he went down the elevator, and he called a cab, and he took the taxi to the V&A with this in the chair, in the cab with him. So that was funny. But so it was in a display case at the V&A for maybe 3 months as a new acquisition. And this woman from Boston, she's called Bobby. She was a docent there. Her husband was working in London at the time, and it was pre-email. And she contacted the curators at the V&A and said, I want to contact the woman that made this. I'd like to commission a piece. So they wrote to me on paper by the mail and said, we have someone who wants one of your chairs. Do you mind if I introduce you to her? And so that's how it was in the old days. So anyway, Bobby commissioned a chair based on this, and I did several sketches for her. She chose one. She went back to Boston for the summer and came back, and I had created a chair. This is actually the chair that I created for her, but this is it reupholstered 20 years later.
Oh.
So the original one had blue velvet and patterned silk. So the silk was on the back and the fronts, and the velvet was on the seat. Bobby came and she saw the chair, and I was getting ready to receive a check for the balance, and I was actually going to go on a 3-week trip to California, where I'd never been here before. And the night before, she came to pick up the chair, and she looked at it, and she was very, very cool. And she had this big red patch on her neck. And I said to her, "You're not happy, are you?" And she said, "Actually, Mary, the chair that you have in the V&A reminds me of my younger self. And what you have here in front of me is me today." So she was a woman of, she had 2 children, and she was an adult, and she was just feeling like, this just represented her as a more voluptuous woman. And I said, "Well, please take the chair, don't pay for it, and I'll call you in 3 weeks' time when I come back." Absolutely 100% that she would love it. And I did. I called her 4 weeks later and said, "So how do you feel about the chair?" And she said, "Mary, we absolutely love it. The kids, we all love it." So I got the check. It's very important getting checks. Really similar chair I wanted to show you, and this was a commission that I had when I moved to Los Angeles. So it's from a big collector in Washington, D.C. She and her husband collected a lot of wood art. They gave it away to a museum, and her place was empty. He died, and then she was beginning to build her own collection, make a residential museum. So I was commissioned to do these 2 chairs plus another, and it was in a very, very tight time frame I was able to do it. So I proposed that I did it similar to the previous one, but she chose these really exciting fabrics. This is actually pink, so it's woven jacquard, very, very old French technique from a French mill, and then this plastic punched cloth from Maharam. Embossed. So it was just a really lovely combination of the very, very old and the very new, and in pink. So Peter and I moved to California, to San Francisco, to teach at CCA in 2001. 2005, we moved to Connecticut. So we gave up teaching, and we started to design for manufacturing companies. And this is one of the chair ranges or seating ranges that came out of that time. So it's for 2 people to sit on each of these benches, draw up a little stool, and you've got a table in the middle to have a kind of casual meeting. So it's like in a kind of startup kind of company where you want to have a couple of these pieces out in the main area and have a very brief meeting and not stay too long. So all of the form making came out of, or the kind of planning of that came out of that kind of functionality. But the form making is my form making. It's soft, it's welcoming, and the kind of detail, the upholstery detailing. And this is really interesting because we worked with a female design director on this, and if it wasn't for her, it wouldn't have, this would not have gone on the market. When you work with furniture manufacturers, typically you're working with guys, and it's just so really huge relief to work with a female design director who maybe appreciates some other kind of sensibility. This is another office chair that Peter and I designed both of these. And I really wanted to show you this because it's just so different from this, but with this chair, this is a conference chair, and so it goes around boardroom tables, and it's available as a high back. I think that's the high back and the low back. And the manufacturers upholster them in whatever fabric the designers order them in. So, but they do them in their own fabrics for the showroom models and photography models. So the manufacturers did this in black, kind of stretchy fabric, and this is white leather. So I had no choice over that. It's that kind of thing is out of our hands. But I really like this chair just because it is for the office environment, and it's just still, even though with all that restraint is still a kind of gentle, form-making, welcoming, on-office-like chair. I wanted to show this to you because it's another material. So back in the UK, we did a lot of commissions. Some of them were public art commissions. And this one I really liked because it's for a sculpture park in the Highlands of Scotland, surrounded by heathers and really wild landscapes. So it's totally hidden by snow in the winter, and then kind of sandy coloured vegetation in the spring, and then it becomes green and that lovely heather, pinky heather colour. So we proposed 3 of these that just sit randomly. Well, it appears random, but it's very conscious. So people are feeling like they're partly in a group, but they can sit and look over the landscape. So very carefully positioned to look at a beautiful scene.
What are those made out of?
Peat.
Peat.
Glass reinforced cement.
What?
Glass reinforced cement. That's the core, so it's made on a mould, and then it's 2 parts, so you can see a central seam there. But then the colour is where it's covered in a product called STO, S-T-O, and you can get that in whatever colour you want. So and it's hard wearing. It's meant to be for the outside of buildings. So it's the STO that you see, and then the core is glass reinforced cement, and it's got a central core of steel and a very deep foundation. The interesting thing was how to get it there and how to install it, and we even looked into hiring a helicopter because it was near Aberdeen where all the oil fields are. So yeah, I think we got it in with quad bikes in the end, I can't remember. And then this one I like immediately after the cement one, because it's similar kind of form making, kind of delicacy, and it's like two orbs melted in together. And this is a brother of this that you can see when we finished. And you can see the kind of language of the seam making. The seams are absolutely considered. The seams have got the same language as the forms. Zippers are part of the aesthetic, and you can look at the base underneath afterwards, where it's all it all pulls together as a whole. Pillows. When I was working up in the Bay Area, we actually had a solo show up in the Bay Area with a gallery called Tessera. I made a lot of sculptural pillows and these benches. There's definitely a connection between this and the piece there and the piece in the window, that kind of flamboyant form making with the fabric. In this case, I did it with I commissioned a fibre artist to interpret my ideas. Some of you might know her. Her name is Jean Casasado. So she was a great person to work with. I very often work with other artists or craftspeople. I know that a lot of craftspeople, when they have periods where they're intensely working on their own work, but there's periods where they're just completely spent. And if you can catch them at that time and commission them to do some work with you, you can get their technical expertise, and they love doing it. It's invigorating to work with someone else, but they don't feel they have to put their own creative input into it, but they want to put their technical input into it. So I did that with the quilted chaiselong that you saw earlier, and this was with Jean. And I always work in series. So this is one of 3, and a longer bench, a square stool, and this triangular stool. And this one was yellow. It's shibori technique. So it's tie-dyed. What I got back from Jean was a stack of squares that had been tied with a kind of spiral, dyed, and then flattened out, and I cut them into a spiral, and then when you open up a spiral, it looks like this. Shibori. This is pure authentic shibori made by master craftsmen from Japan. I was commissioned by them to do 2 chairs for them to show people how shibori could be used in furniture. And my payment was partly some lengths of shibori. I tried to buy more from them, but they couldn't price it. They couldn't sell it because they didn't know how to price it. And this, I just love the whole sensuality of that, the form making, and then the way the pattern goes when it's stretched over the body. This is actually just 8 inches high, So it's about 12 inches by 14 by 8 inches high. Some people use it as a little footstool, but I envisioned it as a little casual stool that you could have in your living room. So it's completely covered in black felt. You can see the black there, but the whole thing is covered in felt. And then the shibori is like a collar all the way around and pulled, not tight, but just really snug. This is a last chair that I'm going to show you. It was made for the same woman in Washington, D.C. Her name was Fleur, and I called the chair after her. Again, she wanted something as a side chair. She wanted something small. I definitely wanted something that was going to be comfortable. This was done just as we were beginning to pack up to move to Los Angeles, so everything was really speedy. And I literally did the back legs as just a squiggle with a soft pencil. I made her several proposals, and she chose the one with the squiggles for the legs. And when she chose that, I just thought, how am I going to make that? So, trial and error, experimentation. This is made from strips that are cut in the bias, and it's made from a fabric that is a kind of rust silk woven with a purplish cotton. So it has this beautiful sheen to it that when you see it in 3 dimensions, it really picks up. It's really silvery, lively, like an underwater fish maybe. And then there's these little curves. So that's that chair. And then exactly the same technique was developed into this, but rationalized a bit. So the panels are almost, it's the same width at the bottom as the top, whereas with the legs on the chair, they became narrow. This is a screen in my room. We live and work in a huge loft downtown, so this is just a room divider, and it's made from artist canvas. And it's just like this. And I put this up on the wall. It was about 3 years ago, and there was someone else in the room here that came to dinner that evening. And so I was sitting with my back to this piece, and 6 people to dinner. Everybody was talking about this thing that was sitting behind me, saying you absolutely have to do something with this, because they felt that it was so powerful and a new direction. And everybody knew I was looking for something that was something that other than what I had been doing. So I spent about 6 months and began to develop work for the walls. And what I feel now is that I'm just at the beginning. And when you look at me, I am definitely a mature artist, but I just feel like, I just really feel excited about the future. Someone asked me this morning, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Thankfully, she didn't wait for an answer, because that's really a hard thing to do. But I just feel excited when I think about 5 years' time. So I have no idea where I'll be, but it most certainly will be doing things that are working more intuitively, subjectively, trusting my judgment, trusting my hunch, being less rational. You can be very rational in so many aspects of your life, but with my work, I just want to make work where I start and then a story unfolds when I'm making it. And how that happens at the minute, I have a piece of work that I developed or finished just this week, and I started it about 6 weeks ago, and I made it, hung it up, didn't work, it was nothing, just no spirit whatsoever. Took it down, left it lying around, and then one day just thought, okay, now I have to give this some time, so I maybe spent a couple of hours on it, and made it into something bigger, changed the orientation, made it back to front, and just on Friday I finally hung it up. And when I hung it up, gravity took control of it, and it started to sink in the middle. So I now have this new piece that has got a big slash in the middle with a big belly sinking in the middle. And it's just, I woke up yesterday and looked at it and just thought, this is a joy to look at. And so all of my work is totally emotion-based. You like it because your gut tells you like it, or you walk on by.
Why did you, or how did you decide or come to find that the artist canvas was going to be your next material? Because on your chairs you've used a wide range of materials, but never an prime
Bleached.
artist
Yeah.
canvas.
Yeah. So in my chairs, I've always developed the forms with unbleached muslin. So I've always worked with cotton, but much finer and softer to develop the patterns for the chairs. And with the artist canvas, I work in a large, I live in a large building where there's a lot of artists. And I borrowed, or I was given a scrap of canvas. Oh yeah, a client wanted some pattern on it, some colour on it. So I just borrowed some canvas. And from that, I just loved the stiffness. I love stiff cloth. I love making three-dimensional form out of stiff cloth, and I love working with relief. So a lot of the fabrics in my furniture are very expensive, like $300 a yard wholesale. So that was why I always had to work with clients, because I could never afford that myself. And now the artist canvas is in abundance. I can get it very easily. I love the colour. I love the fact that it's not white. I love the soft ivory colour to it. But the main thing is the stiffness. So it's the stiffness is the quality that really appeals to me.
Could you tell us about the titles of your pieces, where they come from?
Okay. When I first graduated, I'd made this chair, and the chair I didn't name it. I just thought the thing itself is important. It didn't occur to me to name it. But then it went on show, and everybody was saying, what's it called? And I said it doesn't have a name. So they were given names to my chair. And then that got published, and then I had to just go with a stupid name for a chair that I loved because I hadn't named it. So I've realised it's really important to name your furniture or your art. And I'm not a technical person. A lot of people in my past have said things like, or they'll call their furniture T743, or there's the famous one GF40. So those are just initials and numbers, and I am really, really bad at acronyms and numbers. So I just have to have a name that I emotionally connect with. So the furniture has always been called by a first name, so it's going to be male or female. And sometimes I name it after a client, but the better way that I prefer is if, when it's finished, I'll look at it and just think, is that male or female? And from that, I'll flip one way or the other, and then I'll try to think, what does it feel like? So this one here is full in body, very soft and heavy, so I've called it Douglas. So, it's a lightweight answer, but it's really, really effective. And the most important thing is that usually when I'm doing a commission for somebody, it's all finished, it's just getting ready to go out the door, and I'm having a cup of coffee, and I suddenly think, oh, I've got to name it. So 10 minutes, if I can just get names in 10 minutes, that is perfect. So all of the work here is now the last names of people. And all of this was influenced very much by the landscape when I grew up in the north of Ireland. So the soft little hills, seaweed, just all the kind of softness that I grew up in. And so I call it after the last names of either my family or neighbouring farmers. So this is Campbell, my grandfather was Campbell. This is Bailey, my favourite neighbour who I thought of as a granny was Bailey. Oh yes, and I have a series of 6 pieces that were developed out of iron sweaters or cable knit, and I called all of those because they were inspired by my mum. So I called all of those after the first names of female members of my family. So this is Sheila, and then there was Betty, and Jane, Ivy, Marion. It all has meaning to me, and you literally do need a name as a label, and so it's my prerogative to name them how I want.
Who's she?
O'Neill. After a while, I started looking wider and thought my family names and the names of the neighbours are Scots-Irish, so I started to just pull in Scots-Irish names, so this is a Scots-Irish last name. Thank you very much.